The call that changed everything. The phone rang at 2:47 a.m. That ungodly hour when nothing good ever happens. Sarah Chen stared at the unknown number glowing on her screen, her heart already racing. In her 8 years of teaching literature at Lincoln Academy in Seattle, she'd learned that late-night calls from unknown numbers meant only one thing. Someone was in trouble. Hello? Miss Chen? This is Margaret Holloway. I'm calling from Seattle Presbyterian Hospital. It's about Marcus. Marcus Reed. Even saying his name in her mind sent a chill through Sarah's body. The 15-year-old sophomore who sat in the back corner of her third-period class, always scribbling in that worn leather journal, always asking the questions no one else dared to ask. The boy who'd written an essay about Hemingway's concept of grace under pressure that had made Sarah cry. What happened? The pause on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Sarah would remember this detail later, how time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Marcus collapsed during a late-night study session. Miss Chen, the doctors have discovered something. You need to come now. Marcus is asking for you. Sarah was already reaching for her keys. Part 1. The Student Who Saw Everything. Chapter 1. The Boy in the Corner. 37 years old, unmarried, and perpetually coffee-stained, Sarah Chen wasn't your typical English teacher. While her colleagues decorated their classrooms with motivational posters of cats hanging from tree branches, Sarah's walls were covered with protest poetry from the Vietnam War, passages from Toni Morrison's novels, and photographs from the Birmingham Campaign of 1963. She didn't just teach literature. She taught resistance. Hope. The power of words to change worlds. Marcus Reed had walked into her classroom on the first day of sophomore year like he owned the place, which was strange because everything about him screamed introvert. Tall, lanky, with dark brown skin and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. He'd chosen the back corner desk near the window and claimed it like a throne. Within a week, Sarah knew Marcus was special. While other students struggled with Maya Angelou's poetry, Marcus raised his hand and said, "She's not just talking about birds and cages. She's talking about the prison of other people's expectations. The way society locks you up before you even know you're trapped." The classroom had gone silent. Even Sarah had taken a moment to respond. But it wasn't just his intelligence that set Marcus apart. It was his hunger. Every day after the bell rang, while other students fled for freedom, Marcus would linger. He'd ask about books Sarah had mentioned in passing, writers he'd discovered on his own, historical moments she'd referenced. "Miss Chen, have you ever been to Selma?" he asked one October afternoon, his journal open to a page covered in tight, precise handwriting. "The Edmund Pettus Bridge." Sarah confirmed. "Yes. 3 years ago." "Why? What did it feel like?" Standing where John Lewis stood. Sarah had sat down at her desk, recognizing the weight of the question. This wasn't idle curiosity. Marcus was searching for something. Like touching history, she'd said finally. Like the bridge itself remembered what happened there. The courage. The pain. The determination. Sometimes I think places hold memories in their bones. Marcus had nodded slowly, writing something in his journal. Then he'd looked up at Sarah with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm going to walk that bridge someday. I'm going to feel what they felt. I'm going to understand what they sacrificed." Sarah had believed him. Marcus wasn't the type to make empty promises. Chapter 2. The Hospital Room. Seattle Presbyterian Hospital smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. Sarah pushed through the automatic doors at 3:24 a.m., her jacket thrown over pajama pants, her hair unbrushed. The night nurse directed her to the pediatric oncology ward. Oncology. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Room 412 was dimly lit, the machines beeping softly in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat Sarah didn't understand. Marcus lay in the bed, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. His mother, Claire Reed, sat in a chair beside him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. His father, Daniel, stood by the window, his broad shoulders hunched with grief. "Miss Chen," Marcus whispered, his voice rough. "You came." "Of course I came," Sarah said, moving to his bedside. "What's going on, Marcus?" Claire looked at her husband, then back at Sarah. "Acute myeloid leukemia. Aggressive. The doctors say, they say we are looking at 4 to 6 months. Maybe." The room tilted. Sarah gripped the bed rail to steady herself. 4 to 6 months. This brilliant, beautiful boy had 4 to 6 months. Don't cry, Marcus said softly. I need you to be strong right now, Miss Chen. Because I have to ask you something. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, nodding. Marcus reached for his journal on the bedside table. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it to a bookmarked page. The page was covered in newspaper clippings, printed photographs, and Marcus's careful notes. The Edmund Pettus Bridge, he said. Selma, Alabama. I've been reading everything about it. John Lewis. Hosea Williams. Amelia Boynton. All those people who were willing to bleed for the right to vote. For dignity. For justice. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. I won't get to walk that bridge, Miss Chen. I won't get to stand where they stood. But maybe. He paused, gathering courage. Maybe you could go for me? Could you walk across that bridge and say a prayer for everyone who suffered there? And maybe you could say one for me too. The machines beeped. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed. Claire Reed was crying silently. Sarah took Marcus's hand. Yes, she said. I promise you, Marcus. I will walk that bridge. I will honor everyone who fought there. And I will carry your name with me. Marcus smiled, tears sliding down his cheeks. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Not just the sick kid, but me. The real me. In that moment, Sarah understood that her promise had become something sacred. A covenant between teacher and student that transcended the classroom walls. Part 2, The Weight of a Promise. Chapter 3, The Visits. For the next 3 months, Sarah visited Marcus every day after school. She watched him deteriorate slowly, his body betraying him even as his mind remained sharp. The chemotherapy stole his hair, his strength, his ability to keep food down. But it couldn't touch his spirit. They talked about books, about history, about the strange and beautiful way humans find courage in impossible circumstances. Marcus had developed an obsession with the civil rights movement, spending hours researching names most people had forgotten. Did you know about Jimmy Lee Jackson? Marcus asked one afternoon in January, his voice weak but insistent. The young man killed by state troopers in Marion? Sarah said. The death that inspired the Selma March. 26 years old, Marcus whispered. Shot while trying to protect his mother. He died 8 days later. Miss Chen, I think about him a lot. How he didn't get to see what his death created. How the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge happened because of him, but he never got to witness it. Sarah understood what Marcus wasn't saying. That he, too, wouldn't get to see the impact of his life. That his dreams would remain unfulfilled. Marcus, some people change the world just by existing. Just by caring. Jimmy Lee Jackson matters because people like you remember him. You matter because you'll remember me, Marcus interrupted gently. Because you'll walk that bridge and carry my story. That's enough, Miss Chen. That's more than enough. In early February, Marcus's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. The doctors called it septic shock, complications from the chemotherapy, organ failure. Claire called Sarah at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He's asking for you. The doctors say tonight might be, we need you here. Sarah drove through a winter storm, her windshield wipers fighting against sleet and fear. Chapter 4, The Final Gift. Marcus was barely conscious when Sarah arrived. His breathing was labored, his skin translucent. Claire and Daniel sat on either side of him, holding his hands. The machines had changed their rhythm, slower now, counting down. Miss Chen, Marcus breathed. His eyes found hers. Promise. You remember? I remember, Sarah said, kneeling beside the bed. The Edmund Pettus Bridge. Selma. I will walk it for you. I promise. Tell them, Marcus whispered. Tell them Marcus Reed from Seattle believed in justice. Tell them I understood sacrifice. I will tell them everything, Sarah promised. Marcus closed his eyes, a smile touching his lips. Claire placed something in Sarah's hands, Marcus's journal, worn and precious. He wanted you to have this. He said you'd need it for the journey. Sarah opened the journal with trembling hands. On the first page, in Marcus's careful handwriting. For Miss Chen, who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward anyway. Walk the bridge. Speak the names. Carry the story. That's all any of us can do. That's everything. Marcus. Marcus Reed passed away at 2:14 a.m. on February 12. He was 15 years old. Sarah held his journal and wept. Part 3. The Obstacles. Chapter 5. The Opposition Rises. Sarah announced her intention to travel to Selma during spring break. She expected support. She found resistance. Her sister Rebecca called from Portland. Sarah, you can't afford this. You're already in debt from grad school. This is emotional, not practical. Her department head, Dr. Patricia Winters, summoned her to the office. Miss Chen, I understand you're grieving, but spending your savings on a symbolic gesture seems excessive. Perhaps a donation to a scholarship fund would be more appropriate. Even her closest colleague, Tom Bradley, pulled her aside. Sarah, I'm worried about you. You're not thinking clearly. This kid was your student, not your son. But the cruelest blow came from an unexpected source. Coach Raymond Mitchell, the athletics director who'd coached Marcus in middle school, filed a complaint with the school board. He alleged that Sarah had formed an inappropriate emotional attachment to a minor student. That her planned trip demonstrated unhealthy boundaries. That her behavior warranted investigation. The accusation was absurd. And devastating. Sarah was called before the school board on March 3. She sat in a conference room with fluorescent lights and hostile faces, defending her decision to honor a dying student's wish. Miss Chen, help us understand why you feel compelled to spend thousands of dollars on this trip, board president Sandra Hall said, her tone suggesting she'd already made up her mind. Sarah looked at each board member in turn. Because I made a promise to a dying child. Because Marcus Reed believed that places hold memories, that history matters, that courage should be honored. Because if we can't keep promises to the students we claim to serve, what are we doing in education? The room was silent. Then Claire and Daniel Reed entered the room. We're here to set the record straight, Claire said, her voice steady despite her tears. Chapter 6. The Defense. Claire Reed stood before the school board like a warrior. Grief had carved lines into her face, but her eyes burned with purpose. My son Marcus died 5 weeks ago. In his final months, Miss Chen visited him every single day. She brought him books. She talked to him about history and hope. She made him feel seen. Not as a cancer patient, but as a human being with dreams and intelligence and worth. Daniel stepped forward. Coach Mitchell feels guilty because Marcus collapsed during his practice and Coach ignored the warning signs. Instead of dealing with his own feelings, he's trying to destroy someone who actually cared about our son. Claire pulled out an envelope. We've withdrawn our life insurance money. $10,000. We're giving it to Miss Chen for her trip to Selma. Because honoring Marcus's dream is the only memorial that matters to us. Sarah gasped. No, I can't accept. You will accept it, Claire said firmly. You will walk that bridge. You will carry our son's name. You will show the world what a teacher's love looks like. Sandra Hall looked uncomfortable. The other board members exchanged glances. The complaint against Sarah suddenly looked petty and cruel in the face of a grieving family's support. The board will take this under advisement, Sandra said quietly. Miss Chen, you're free to proceed with your spring break plans. After the meeting, Sarah embraced Claire and Daniel in the parking lot. They cried together, 3 people bound by love for a boy who would never walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Bring him home to us, Claire whispered. Bring his spirit home. Sarah promised she would. Part 4. The Journey. Chapter 7. Preparation. With the Reed family's support and the school board's grudging approval, Sarah threw herself into preparation. She read everything she could about the Selma to Montgomery marches. She watched documentaries. She contacted local historians in Alabama. Most importantly, she read Marcus's journal. Page after page revealed the depth of Marcus's passion for civil rights history. He'd documented every name he could find of people who'd been injured on Bloody Sunday. He'd written personal reflections about courage and justice. He'd sketched the bridge from photographs, trying to capture its significance. One entry, dated December 8, stopped Sarah cold. If I don't survive this, I want someone to walk that bridge and understand what it meant. Not as a tourist, but as a witness. To stand where John Lewis had his skull fractured. To imagine Amelia Boynton lying unconscious, beaten by state troopers. To feel the weight of that March 7, 1965 moment when everything hung in the balance. History isn't abstract. It's real people making real choices in the face of real violence. Someone needs to remember that. Someone needs to carry it forward. Sarah understood then that her journey wasn't just about keeping a promise. It was about becoming a witness. About transforming Marcus's unfinished dream into something tangible and real. 3 days before her departure, Sarah received a call from an unexpected source. An elderly man named William Brooks, a veteran of the Selma movement, had heard about her journey through a mutual friend at the Southern Poverty Law Center. "Miss Chen, I was 23 years old when I marched on that bridge. I got my head cracked open by a state trooper's billy club. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I want you to carry something for me." They met at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. William was 82, his hands gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes were clear and bright. He gave Sarah a small cloth bag. Inside was a piece of concrete. "From the original bridge surface," William explained. "They replaced it years ago during renovation. I kept this piece. The blood of my friends soaked into this concrete. Take it. Return it. Let the bridge have it back." Sarah held the concrete carefully, feeling the weight of history in her hands. "I will," she whispered. Chapter 8. The Bridge. Sarah arrived in Selma on March 20th, exactly 1 month after Marcus's death. The Alabama sky was impossibly blue, the kind of spring day that makes you believe in redemption. She checked into a small hotel near downtown, then sat in her room, paralyzed by the enormity of what she was about to do. Marcus's journal lay open on the bed. William Brooks's piece of concrete sat on the nightstand. Letters from Claire and Daniel were tucked in her jacket pocket. Sarah had expected to feel prepared. Instead, she felt overwhelmed. At 6 a.m. the next morning, she walked to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The bridge rose before her like a monument to both brutality and hope. Sarah stood at the base, looking up at the arch of steel and concrete that had become sacred ground. She thought about John Lewis, 25 years old, leading marches toward what he knew would be violence. She thought about the 600 people who'd walked despite their fear. She thought about the state troopers waiting on the other side with clubs and tear gas and hatred. She thought about Marcus, 15 years old, dying in a hospital bed but dreaming of this bridge. Sarah took her first step onto the bridge. The morning sun cast long shadows across the steel. Traffic hummed around her, but Sarah barely noticed. With each step, she felt the weight of history settling onto her shoulders. This bridge had witnessed courage and cowardice, violence and victory, death and determination. Halfway across, Sarah stopped. This was approximately where the marchers had been when state troopers attacked. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine that day, the gas-stinging eyes and lungs, the clubs falling, people screaming, blood on concrete. She opened Marcus's journal and read aloud. Marcus Reed from Seattle, Washington believed in justice. He understood sacrifice. He dreamed of standing where heroes stood. Though his body failed him, his spirit walks this bridge today. Sarah placed her hand on the bridge railing, feeling the vibrations of passing cars, the warmth of sunlight, the pulse of a place that refused to let history die. Then she took out William Brooks's piece of concrete. She found a small crevice where the railing met the bridge surface and carefully wedged it there, returning it to the structure that had witnessed his courage. "For William," she whispered. "And for everyone who bled here." Sarah continued walking, reaching the far side of the bridge where the marchers had been turned back. She stood in that spot for nearly an hour, watching the Alabama River flow beneath the bridge, thinking about rivers of courage that flow through human history. A voice interrupted her reverie. "You okay, miss?" Sarah turned to find an elderly black woman watching her with kind eyes. "I'm fine," Sarah said. "Just keeping a promise." The woman nodded slowly. "I was 12 years old when they marched. Watched from my mama's porch. Saw the troopers beating folks. Swore I'd never forget. You keeping someone's memory alive?" "My student," Sarah said. "He dreamed of walking this bridge. He died before he could." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Then he's walking it now, honey. Through you. That's how love works. That's how memory survives." Sarah understood in that moment that her promise hadn't ended when she walked the bridge. It had just begun. Epilogue. What promises become. Sarah returned to Seattle changed. The bridge had done something to her, opened something in her understanding of what teaching meant. She realized that her job wasn't just about literature or history. It was about bearing witness. About carrying forward the dreams of students who wouldn't get to fulfill them. She started a program at Lincoln Academy called the Marcus Reed Fellowship, which sent students to civil rights historical sites each summer. She established a scholarship for students passionate about social justice. She made sure Marcus's journal was archived in the school library, available for anyone who wanted to understand how one boy's passion for history became a catalyst for change. Claire and Daniel Reed became Sarah's closest friends. They spoke every week, sharing memories of Marcus, talking about the ways his spirit continued to influence the world. William Brooks died 2 years after Sarah's journey to Selma. At his funeral, his daughter told Sarah that returning that piece of concrete to the bridge had given her father peace in his final years. He'd spent his whole life carrying the weight of Bloody Sunday. Sarah's act had helped him let it go. The story of Sarah's promise spread. She was invited to speak at conferences, to write articles, to inspire other teachers. But Sarah always insisted she wasn't special. She'd simply done what any teacher should do, honored a student's dream. 5 years after Marcus's death, Sarah returned to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This time, she brought 12 students from Lincoln Academy, the first recipients of the Marcus Reed Fellowship. They walked the bridge together, reading aloud from Marcus's journal, sharing stories of courage, understanding that history isn't just about the past. It's about choosing to remember, to honor, to carry forward. Standing on that bridge again, surrounded by students Marcus would never meet but had somehow influenced, Sarah finally understood what her promise had become. It wasn't just about one journey to Selma. It was about creating a ripple effect of remembrance that would extend far beyond her lifetime. Marcus Reed had died at 15, but his legacy was just beginning. Because some promises, once made, never end. They transform into something larger than the people who make them. They become bridges themselves, connecting past to present, lost to hope, death to eternal life. Sarah touched the bridge railing and whispered the same words she'd spoken 5 years before. Marcus Reed from Seattle, Washington believed in justice. He understood sacrifice. He walks this bridge still. And he always would. The end.